And the second thing I'd say is that money is an energy which can be used to do great good. So I think this person, they hit on a key point, like the accumulation of wealth, for which I'd add for selfish purposes. That, of course, is evil. Because you only got to look around and see what you could be doing. You could be saving lives. Everybody knows that.
The Spiritual Freedom Show with Richard Lawrence, where politics is not the answer, materialism counts for nothing, and spirituality will set you free.
This person begins, they title the post this way. They say, being rich is a meaningless scam. All right, then they go on. Billionaires and millionaires should not exist because the accumulation of wealth is meaningless and I would say even evil. We live in a society where we all agree to work so we can support society and ourselves. And then we have some morons that accumulate the wealth we generate for no apparent reason other than to justify their egos or satisfy their egos. Who will benefit from their wealth? Their descendants who will be spoiled brats living on stolen money, or do they need the money to satisfy their made-up desires? Where do those desires end? It's literally like a drug that people just keep wanting more of. A man can be happy with just simple things, so how do we justify an expensive car? It literally makes no sense. True geniuses that offer real value to our society don't care about being rich. They just want to move forward and improve. Don't buy into the lies. So I thought we'd kick it off. It was an interesting post.
It's a very interesting post, as one can look at it in many ways. But let's agree on one thing, that true wealth is an inner state. Wealth is within us. And that's easily provable. There's so many people who are very wealthy, have been very wealthy, who were not happy, who were not fulfilled, and sometimes tragically so. So that's absolutely easy to prove. You don't measure, and I think there have been many researches done into the happiest countries in the world, and frequently they are not the wealthiest countries. So that point is correct. However, there's a balance to this, and Dr. King, and you know what I'm going to say, Dr. King himself was extremely balanced about this, and he looked upon money as energy. I mean, it's a limiting thing. The concept of money is a complication, because and we know that from the sort of collapse of markets and some of the things that have happened. It gets more and more complicated and further away from reality. But in essence, it's about paying for something. And there's nothing wrong in that principle. You can't get anything for nothing. So that's the first thing I'd say. And the second thing I'd say is that money is an energy which can be used to do great good. So I think this person, they hit on a key point, like the accumulation of wealth, for which I'd add for selfish purposes. That, of course, is evil. Because you only got to look around and see what you could be doing. You could be saving lives. Everybody knows that. It's not something to be proud of. Strangely, some wealthy people or financially wealthy people are proud of it, which is really weird, because it isn't. It should almost be a cause of shame if it's all being used just for selfishness.
I think that's a great point, because when you look at someone who just paid $30,000 for a suit or $1 million for a car, you kind of think, does this person just deserve my should I pity them? Should I admire them? Should I feel disgusted by them? And that, I think that helps us to realize what our real values are in terms of life. And I think that the really difficult thing for me is, okay, it's one thing you've earned it. Say you've earned it in a fair way, fine. But it's really a question of therefore how you use it after that fact.
Absolutely.
And just considering the state of the world today, can we really afford to indulge in the way that we do, especially when we take the perspective that we really are all one? And when we choose to use our money in a selfish way, it's and especially in the light of greater wisdom and in the light of oneness, it's as absurd as our left hand swatting away our right hand when we're trying to feed ourselves. That's the degree of ignorance we are affirming, not only within ourselves, but in terms of our view of the world as a whole.
True, but I'm going to put out a slightly different thought here, which is you could have a person who was completely dedicated to making money through legal means and working extremely hard to do so purely for philanthropy. They'd be a rare individual.
Would be.
Usually you've got people who do a little bit of charity here, a little bit there, but that's not their main thing. But you could have people who really, their whole raison d'etre behind earning money is to help others. So, and in that case, it might be the most useful thing that they could do.
Yeah,
so you can't even rule it out as a spiritual path, especially in these days.
It's interesting you say that, because there's another comment here by someone on the same post who said, there are wealthy people who use their resource influence to make a positive impact on the world. And I think they were trying to add that balance to the perspective there. Yeah, and I take your point entirely. But that's kind of like that. At that point, you've not been mastered by this materialistic scheme. You are sort of subverting it. You're more the master of it. You're using it in order to further to kind of like transmute it even.
And in this age of service, and that's out really stressed in the 9 freedoms, you do need to have certain amount of wealth, financial wealth, money, in order to perform your mission in life. It may not be your main, it may not even be for philanthropy, it's just earning a living. You're not going to be able to, for example, let's say you wanted to really dedicate yourself to some cause in a town like London, where we are now, or in Los Angeles, or in New York, or somewhere, and you had to be there to fulfill your spiritual purpose. You'd need to have a certain amount of money to do that, unless you were given money. But still money would be involved. So there is a practical element to it, and just seeing it as an evil is a bit simplistic.
I agree.
Having said that, most people aren't of that persuasion. And I can definitely say, having done hundreds of psychic readings for various people, and I used to do a lot of psychic readings, believe it or not, 40 years ago. I was like, very well.
You don't look old enough for it.
Oh, thank you. Say that again. I was booked over a year ahead, and I had a lot of people coming to me, and Dr. King actually had personally set me up to do this. He'd actually designed the cover for my crystal ball. And I used a crystal ball not because of its normal connotations, but to me, because it was a symbol of the emptiness. And within the emptiness is everything. Where there's nothing, there's everything. The vacuum, if you like. So it really worked for me. But I had a lot of people coming to me who were really just wanting to know about money or relationships after a while. And that didn't interest me enough to continue.
I see.
I would certainly was interested in people who had their spiritual path in mind. But what I was going to go on to say is I've had quite a few contacts with people on the other realms who have now died, in other words, who are now especially at that time, were making contact, who bitterly regretted their use of money. That was one of their biggest sources. Nearly everyone that you get a contact from on the other realms, any good, reliable medium will know this, have regrets. That's the nature of it. That's not the whole of them. They might have things they're very proud of as well. And they could be extremely fulfilled on the other realm, especially if they've gone to a higher one. But there will be regrets because they're going to have to come back again and correct certain things. And one of the common concerns that people have is that they were too materialistic. They were doing the wrong things and spending far too much time doing those things. And even actually you'll find people who haven't passed on, at the end of their life they're looking back and they wish they'd kind of, as it were, spent less time in the office and more time doing something else. So it's just purely a means to an end. But if you see that as your ultimate fulfillment, you'll be very, very disappointed, especially if you're a deep thinker.
Yeah, absolutely.
A more superficial person might skim along a bit and think they're having a great time. But a deeper thinker will think, no, this isn't the answer. This isn't hit the spot.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's a number of points you made. I think just coming back to the one you said about the practicality of like living in a city like London or Los Angeles, and that being necessary to do your spiritual work. I think it kind of goes back to the point that a lot of people kind of they talk about Maya and the illusion, and they sort of dismiss it all. And that's kind of a dangerous thing, to sort of like dismiss money as something that you don't need to think about and take care of and make sure you have in order. Like other things in life that you would have to, it would be easy almost in a way to go off somewhere completely and make these things, no longer your concern. And make it someone else's problem to fill your begging bowl on a daily basis. Yeah,
I'd go even further. So you wouldn't really be able to do a lot of good in the world unless you've accepted money management as one of the things that you needed to do. You have to manage that to do anything. You know, either that, I remember Dr. King telling me in the early days prior to the command, so prior to 1954, well prior to the Nine Freedoms, he was a full practicing yogi. I mean, he was doing 8 hours of yoga a day, and he came across a book called Nature's Finer Forces by Rama Prasad, and he was so struck by it that he wanted to take it all the way, that book, without going into it in any detail here.
Sure.
He said he would have either had to be, in those days, a millionaire, which would be a lot more than a millionaire now, or he'd have to drop out and virtually become a tramp, as it were, or he should drop out from society and become nomadic, like the old sannyasins, which wouldn't work in the West, really. You'd end up in terrible pickle. And of course, he never was reliant on social services. Not that I'm against social services, they're necessary for people, but you know, that's, if you're just doing it as a cop-out and not because you need it, that's not right either. So he didn't, but those were the two choices. And that's the old age approach. The new age approach is service to others amid the clatter, service amid the clatter, amid the noise, amid the smell. That's what we have to do, and to do that we have to manage money. Certainly been one of the lessons of my life. It took me a while, because I was very much of the school you were talking about there. It's all Maya, it's all an illusion. I no longer think the philosophy of Maya, or delusion, the old yogic or Hindu philosophy, as it was, really works in this age. I'd rather see it as what Mars Sector 6 calls it, who gave the Nine Freedoms, actually not in this, but in a thing called Meditation for this Age, the reflection. You know, not reality, not the life even, but the reflection. But it still exists, and it still has to be dealt with.
Yeah, I think that's the essence of the balance we need to strike with this, isn't it? It's like, it is something that needs to be dealt with, but at the same time, we all need to avoid becoming hypnotized by materialism as for what it is, like thinking that those things are an end in and of itself, that it's about the accumulation of wealth and things, and that those things will ever bring us fulfillment, which of course they won't, which brings us back to the first point that you were making.
And I agree with another thing this person said, which is it's I don't know if these are his words, or her words, it's what you feel within. So I've met wealthy, what I would call extremely rich. I'm going to say rich rather than wealthy, actually, because I defined wealth as an inner state. So let's say rich. Extremely rich people who don't feel rich. They don't think they're rich. I still do know someone, and this person, by most standards, is extremely rich. She and her husband have several homes, a chauffeur. I don't know whether they have a yacht or not. But I remember having a walk with her, and she was pointing out some properties in London to me, and she said, the people who live there, they don't know how we live. This was a multi-millionaire at the minimum. She didn't feel rich, and you can have wealthy people, well, sorry, I'm going to correct myself there, rich people who, they've got the yacht, but they haven't got the plane. They don't really think they've made it. And then it goes on to how much power do I have over politicians, and it's never satisfied, that craving. And sooner or later, you've just got to detach from it. And the Master Aetherius gives that as one of the keys. Detach is essential for the Kundalini to rise. That's a statement, I mean, I paraphrased it, made by the Master Aetherius.
Yeah, and if we think about what life is really about, then that becomes an essential...
Absolutely crucial.
Essential step for us to make. I think there's another point there as well about the fulfillment thing, which is, you know, one really dangerous psychological and spiritual thing about, you know, buying into this kind of materialism and things and delights and those being what life is about, is that there's this constant negative affirmation that's happening within us that we can't be whole or we can't be happy without these things, and that we're sort of empty without them. And that, imagine what that's doing to ourselves. It's the opposite of what we want to affirm in terms of realizing and recognizing that we are not just one with God, but that we are God, and that spark of God lives within us. And it's like it's going in the completely opposite direction to where we want to go on the spiritual path as
well, we're programmed, we're conditioned very, very successfully, and we as a whole, and we have to break free from that. And that's one of the key things in the cosmic teachings, breaking free from this kind of conditioning. And behind it, very often, is fear. It's one of the things that is emphasized, and also breaking free from possessiveness, is an absolute key to advancement. And these are the barriers. And inside the aura, they manifest as what the old yogis would call knots.
Oh, yeah.
It's one of the things that they do. Desires, fears, they all manifest, doubts, and stop the free flow of energies upwards to the higher psychic centers, which is where they should be going. So, you can engage in materialistic things, and you will be dampening down your spiritual progress. Now, if you're doing that knowingly, I've got to engage in this because I have a higher cause, which is service, then karma will smile on you. Mm. And so you'll be given that opportunity again because you did it for the right motive. Mm. There's a great saying, what you reject is laid at your feet. Mm. But you've got to be rejecting it for the right reason.
Yeah, got it.
So sometimes we do have to reject the higher states and higher consciousness just to live in the world and perform our mission, our task, whatever that may be, our task of service. And not just service to those that we love, that are close to us, service to people we don't know at all. You have to do that. But if you do that, though, you've rejected it, it will be laid at your feet and you will be given the opportunity. And then you have to take it. And I found that sometimes people don't take it. When the opportunity actually does come along, that there is a danger that although your motive was right in getting wrapped up in various material, physical things that you have to do, they can't see the wood for the trees. And you get lost in the forest.
Yeah.
Although the forest should be a place of enlightenment. That's where the rishis found it.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, there's a real lesson in there, and I think you're right, there's a real danger of getting so involved in it that you do lose touch with why you started in the first place. I thought I'd read here just one other comment that I thought was very thoughtful and gives another perspective. In response to this original one, this person says, there's a lot of people who think they can't reach their peak spirituality without being set for life, as in like having enough money and whatnot. And I'm starting to wonder if it's another trap or distraction, manana type of thing. There's countless saints and yogis who are born with nothing and achieve spiritual heights beyond imagination. There's countless more who abandoned everything to seek that, living on the streets begging. We talked a little bit about that. Yeah. There's plenty who also maintained a householder working life and also achieve immense spiritual heights. Some of the truly holiest people I know, this person's saying, work full-time to support their family and then spend every weekend volunteering at temples across the country with what seems like zero time for themselves. Personally, I don't think we need anything external to us, just the will to seek God right then and there in the present moment. Me being broke or flush hasn't affected my success or struggle to reach spiritual progress. If anything, the more miserable and stressed and worried I am, the easier it gets to move towards spirituality. And financial pressure is an excellent source of this for most. The idea of having a modest home and no worries or financial pressures or responsibilities outside of my own survival so I can focus entirely on spirituality is really just doesn't seem realistic, even achieving that, as there's been times when I've had that and it didn't really make a difference. So if you want God and that desire is sincere, no worldly thing can get in your way, just my opinion. So that is. Can I, before we get into that one, come back to something that was said by the other one, which was about geniuses? Oh, yeah. And a statement there made that geniuses are not interested in money, basically. Sorry. I'm sorry to have to tell you, there are some geniuses in history who might not have even done the work they did if it hadn't been a commission for money. I mean, the Mona Lisa is just one example by Leonardo da Vinci. So if you substitute the word adepts, I think, for geniuses, you could say that. Because the adept would know what they were doing and why, and they would be a genius anyway, because you couldn't be a true adept unless you were a genius in at least one thing, but more than one thing probably. But you then have control of it. You'd know why you were doing it, and yes, you take some money because you have to, but But I think there have been. I mean, on the other hand, you have someone like Mozart, who, from all we can tell, gave up a more lucrative line of composition to follow his inner creativity and ended up a pauper. So that would be an example which would fit with the comment that person made. But I'm afraid
There certainly have been some geniuses in history who were geniuses in one way or another, who also liked to get money.
Yeah, sure.
But you can move beyond that. The spirit of what is said is true. You know, a spiritual person, a more advanced person, they will not be driven by money. They will recognize the need for money, and they'll use it correctly.
Yeah, that's really the key, isn't it?
Yeah.
Use it correctly for that spiritual purpose at the end of the day. Yeah.
But you know, the other comment that you've just read, is there anything from there you want to? Because a lot of points in there. What would
I just
you
thought
pick out there?
you know, it was interesting that they kind of highlight that it was neither wealth or poverty that really fostered their spiritual journey. And the way I see it is, you know, we often think that there's a lot of things getting in the way of our spiritual path, but in reality, they all are life itself and the lessons that we draw from it. I mean, that's what Mars Sector 6 is telling us, isn't it? That's what our spiritual evolution and our growth into greater wisdom is about mastering these lessons which are presented to us through our experiences in life.
Yes.
So it's not just like, oh, I'll get all this money stuff sorted out and then I'll be in a position where I can finally sit down and do my practices or something like that. You know, I think that's often like a misconception people have.
It is, and I think it takes us very much, I mean, as well as, it takes us to all the freedoms, actually. Certainly all the early ones, because when you get to the higher ones, they don't even use money at all. Yeah. But, and it makes me think very much of the second freedom in particular. All these freedoms apply. Of course, the higher freedoms, they don't have money anyway, they don't need it, they're way beyond monetary systems. But certainly on Earth, here's a statement by Mars Sector 6, love is not possession. In its highest aspect, it is above all forms of individualization. It is impersonal. It is not binding, as is possession, but it brings freedom. It's very interesting that, because most people think that possession brings them freedom.
Yeah, that's
in fact, it's binding, we're told here. Now, that again comes down to the motivation of the person who's, let's just say you're buying a house or a flat or a car, whatever it might be. Are you buying that because you want to possess a house or a flat or a car? Or that element of you that just wants to possess it? That part of it is binding. That is not freedom. The part that is just saying, I have to do this because I have to be here, I have to live, and this is the most effective way that's going to enable me to do my task. I'm just buying what I need. I'm not buying something way beyond what I need. That's fine. If it was all that, if your motive was 100%, and motive is a very complex thing. You find it in spiritual people too, who gain certain states or certain attainments. It's good to gain these attainments, but it has to be, again, the motive is purely to advance spiritually and serve others. If a little element which can creep in, it does with all of us at times, of ego, look what I've got to. That bit of it is binding, will take you down and will bring the energies down. This is something I'm more aware of than ever, because we're told in this wonderful Bible, as we're calling it, the 9 Freedoms, that service will bring about an unforced rise of Kundalini. And that means the motive of service as well as the act. The act's crucial, by the way. Right. But it's an energy which will cause this rise. If somewhere inside there is a bit of ego, a bit of possessiveness, a bit of fear, whatever it might be, fear of perhaps insecurity, driven fear, which, going in an unbalanced way, seeking more possessions than you actually need, more money than you actually need, but driven by fear, all those things, those elements of your motive, of your purpose behind it, will end up as barriers. There's that wonderful prayer, Almighty God, there will be no barriers now. At the end of it's actually in the 12 blessings, the 5th blessing. It's the last line of the prayer, Almighty God, there will be no barriers now, is an affirmation, actually. Yeah. It's not even a request. Yeah. It's an affirmation. And these are the barriers. I think that prayer is talking about more than individual barriers. It's in the world as a whole. But within the individual, all these things serve to prevent the true wealth which exists within us from manifesting.
I think that's a beautiful, profound point to end on this week.
Thank you, Darren.
Thank you very much. Hey everybody, it's Darren here. Thanks for tuning into the show. Now, if you enjoyed that episode, don't forget to subscribe for more wisdom from the 9 Freedoms. If you'd like to find out more about the 9 Freedoms, about Mars Sector 6 by Dr. George King, go to our website, that's aetherius.org. Richard and I love hearing from you, receiving your comments, your questions on your spiritual experiences, and talking about them on the show. So do write to us, share them with us at spiritualfreedom@richardlawrence.co.uk. Always remember that service is the jewel in the rock of attainment. See you next time.